in color. The continuing story of Peyton Place. Starring Dorothy Malone as Constance Mackenzie, Ed Nelson as Michael Rossi, Ryan O'Neill as Rodney Harrington, Barbara Parkins as Betty Anderson, Tim O'Connor as Elliot Carson, Christopher Connolly as Norman Harrington, Patricia Morrow as Rita Harrington, James Douglas as Stephen Cord.
For the second time in a matter of days, the police have been summoned to the Peyton house to investigate a death. Lee Weber died violently, a victim of his own loyalty to Martin Peyton, and of the old man's cold-blooded betrayal of that loyalty. Both Peyton and Stephen have already made statements to the police. Their stories agreed. The shooting took place accidentally in protection of the old man's life.
Isn't it enough? I'm sorry. Did I do that for you?
Yeah, that's it, Sergeant.
Harry, pick up those pieces of cane, will you? We'll talk with you later, Mr. Cord.
All right.
I don't see why there should be any more questions.
Is that a statement, or are you asking my professional opinion?
Well, Leslie's phone call to the police confirmed what we told them. It should be a routine matter.
What was Lee Weber doing at Leslie's office, by the way?
You heard that, Sergeant. Leslie mistook Lee Weber for an intruder and fired.
I'm asking you.
Remember when I hired Lee Weber? How you shouted at me and said that you wouldn't remain under the same roof with your sister's murderer? Remember what I answered? It was the only way I could make sure that Lee Weber wouldn't go unpunished. My granddaughter has been revenged by her twin brother, Stephen, who defended her murderer successfully for his crime. Poetic justice.
Oh, you see it any way you like. I can't share your detachment. A man is dead.
A killer.
A vicious, twisted human being, but a human being.
You pulled the trigger.
I didn't pull the trigger. The gun went off somehow. It was an accident.
Was it? You wanted him dead?
I didn't want.
Are you sure? Weber had lost a great deal of blood. He was in a weakened condition.
Well, you saw how he clung to that gun.
Stephen, if you'd tried just a little harder, mightn't you have gotten it away from me? But then, of course, you would have been forced to hold him for the police. And once again, Lee Weber might have gotten off much more lightly than he deserves.
No.
You sound so positive. But you'll be asking yourself these same questions the rest of your life. You had your choice, Stephen. Which of two enemies you wanted dead? You spared me.
A man came in and struggled with another man to prevent a murder. A gun went off, killing him. As simple as that. Now, why must you complicate this into something devious, some twisted moment of decision?
How long were you listening in the hall before you came to my rescue?
You're guessing.
But you saved my life. A second time. And I'm properly grateful. Now, Stephen, would you be good enough to call Dr. Rossi?
Dr. Rossi's with him upstairs. I can't disturb them, Mr. Harrington.
I'll wait.
happened, Stephen?
It's all right, Mary.
Well?
You know what happened or you wouldn't be here. You told the police you shot an intruder, and that intruder turned out to be Lee Weber. Well, that's the way it goes sometimes with intruders. Everyone knows that, Leslie.
That's not what I meant.
Weber's dead. Nobody's going to contradict your story. You're off the hook.
Are you suggesting that I lied?
I am.
What did Weber say before he died?
Oh, what difference does it make?
Answer me. What did Weber say? What were his last words?
Oh, go home, Leslie.
Now you and the old man have reason to protect each other, don't you?
Look, I'll tell you what. I'll see you at Weber's funeral. Except that neither of us is going to be there. What do you suppose that means, Leslie?
Tell him something for me. Tell him I think he's a fool.
Get out of here. You hear me? Get out of here!
So you expect my white counter climb?
Well, not necessarily, but since there was a minor elevation last week, I thought I'd take a close check on it. Now you can look around.
No, I've seen enough bloodshed for one evening. But if it has risen again, that'll be the third time, won't it? Well, I assume another drug is played out on me. What next, Doctor? Another short-term miracle with a bogus Latin name? Or have we run the list? You warned me this would happen eventually.
We don't even know that your present medication has lost its effectiveness. We won't know that until we have the results of this test.
Well, I was tired after Adrienne's funeral, and I'm exhausted now. I suppose if I asked you the reason why, you'd give me the same excuse you gave me then. And the same lecture about the immorality of revenge. Or would you, Doctor?
I understood that Lee Weber's death was accidental.
Well, hardly a regrettable accident. What is it, Doctor?
Well, I was just thinking the last time I examined you, Lee Weber was still in this room. You two seemed very close.
Closer than master and servant?
Well, it appeared that you had something more in common.
Much more. My granddaughter's Anne Howard's death.
That amuses me. For 20-odd years, you denied that relationship.
So you thought I wanted her murderer to go unpunished? Lecture me, Doctor. Oh, yes, tell me again what you told me after Adrienne's death. How strongly you disapprove of an eye for an eye. You have the advantage of being a scientist. A discipline to put aside all personal, petty relationships and remain objective.
I never claimed to be objective about Anne. I just loved her. And I never hated Lee Weber. I despised him.
Spoken like a truly civilized man. You delude yourself, Doctor, that you've outgrown the primitive emotion of the savage when you've merely given them a respectability with a new name.
All right. I may have hated Lee Weber enough at the time to want him dead, but that was long ago, and as you know, Mr. Peyton, emotions fade. Just tell me, what does Weber's death prove?
Well, as I told Stephen, poetic justice.
Will it bring back Anne Howard? I'll run the test myself tonight. You'll know in the morning.
And if it proves unfavorable?
Then I'd recommend you go back to the Boston clinic as soon as possible.
Oh, as hopeless as that, is it?
Well, not really hopeless. It's just that you'll need around-the-clock supervision.
Well, thank you, Doctor, for your many professional kindnesses. I'm sure that at times they went very easy for you.
You'll hear from me in the morning, sir.
This is a house of death, isn't it?
can I do for you?
Oh, I see you got a big story. I bet you sell a lot of papers.
It's just an accidental shooting.
Oh, why don't you try telling that to Lee Weber? Or don't, he isn't waiting to hear you.
I didn't know Lee Weber was an especial friend of yours.
Oh, do you have to be a friend before you feel sorry that he got killed?
Well, Norman, some people are just not that much of a loss.
You're always a loss to yourself.
Not always to society.
Well, he wasn't adding anything, but he wasn't taking anything either, was he?
Now, look, Norman, now,
You know,
I
Mr.
don't
Carson, he was trying to straighten himself out. He got a job. He stayed away from his old gang. He even wore a suit and a tie. He had a whole new scene going for him.
He hadn't even tried to commit any new murders, had he?
Well, that's kind of rank, isn't it?
Not any more rank than pushing Ann Howard off a cliff.
You know, I thought you were the one who was so against capital punishment. Or is that only in your editorials there?
Doesn't mean I want to see murderers running around the streets.
You want to see them in prison where they belong?
Yeah, as long as we have laws that say that's where they should be placed.
You know, in that same editorial, second paragraph, you said prison is to turn guys broke the law into good citizens. Not just to take years out of their life, but rehabilitation instead of, what was it you called it?
Instead of reparation, which is always impossible. Instead of revenge, which is always meaningless.
It's a good phrase if you meant it.
I meant it, Norman. I meant it.